This podcast is intended for informational purposes only and should not be considered or interpreted as legal or professional advice.
Welcome back to another episode of Mika Minutes. I'm your host, Mika Domingo. My guest in this episode is Patrick Elahmadie, the founder of the law office of Patrick Elahmadie. Patrick is an attorney who practices both estate planning and small business law. His insight and experience help individuals, families, and entrepreneurs protect their assets and build their legacy. Additionally, Patrick is of counsel to my firm, Mika Domingo Law Group, and I have seen him consistently provide our clients with practical solutions and strategic guidance. Welcome to Mika Minutes, Patrick.
Thanks so much for having me, Mika. Great to see you.
Great to see you. Patrick, can you explain the benefits of forming an entity if you're a business owner? And why might someone choose to form an entity like an LLC?
Yeah, so I think the number one guiding reason why people form entities is limited liability. So if you are operating without an entity as a sole proprietorship or a partnership, there's no line between what is the business's and what's yours, including what are the liabilities of the business and what are liabilities that might apply to you. So if I go and I start operating a business without an entity and God forbid something happens and I get sued, well, the people that sue me, they can go after everything that I own because I am the business. But when you create an entity like an LLC or an S corporation or C corporation, what you're doing is you're creating a separate structure that's funded separately, that has its own bank account, that has its own management, even if that management is you. But you're basically saying, this is the business that you're interacting with, not me personally, not Patrick, but Patrick Inc. And assuming that you do everything properly, you follow what are called the corporate formalities, you will create this shield between the business and yourself so that if something happens with the business and the business's interaction with its customers or employees or the public, and you were to, say, get sued and it's a successful lawsuit, well, if you've done everything properly, there's going to be a line drawn between the business and you so that if someone were to sue you for assets, they can only sue for the assets of the business and not your personal assets. And it's kind of one of the major drivers of what allows people to go into business and take these risks in business because they know that the risk in that business is limited to essentially their investment in the business. But there's also credibility. You know, people, when they know that they're dealing with a business, they know that you've gone through the trouble to set something up, and usually it has its own general approach and interaction with the public and marketing, and you're basically saying this is an official thing that you're dealing with. And among other things, there's management structures, the flexible management, there's flexible taxation approaches with different types of entities, but we could talk about this for hours, but I'd say that the biggest one, if I were to pick just one, would be the limited liability.
Well, absolutely. I think we would need to talk about this in another episode, right? As a follow-up, because right now we're providing very basic information, and I'm sure our listeners will have questions. So let's talk about how an entity might fit into an estate plan. How does forming an entity such as an LLC or an S Corp impact one's estate plan? And what are some common mistakes people make when they have both a business and an estate plan?
Great question. So I know your listeners know this, but one of the biggest benefits of putting together an estate plan is to avoid probate. Right. And so when they're calculating what are the assets that count towards probate or assessing whether there is probate, they look at everything you own, your entire net worth. That includes any business interests you might have. So a lot of times when people are setting up an estate plan, they'll remember their homes, they'll remember to retitle their accounts, they'll remember to name beneficiaries on their 401ks. They'll go through the exercises that you would go through with an estate planning attorney, but they may not pay attention to the business that they own. And if that business is large enough to trigger probate, which now is, I think it's 208,000 or whatever it is in California, well, now that business is going to have to go through probate in order to be passed along. And so when you have a business and you're putting together an estate plan, you want to make sure to take those shares of the business or the membership interest, if it's an LLC, and you want to put those into the trust. And what that does is it removes it from being counted for probate purposes, but it also has a built-in succession planning, because when the shareholder of that corporation, for example, is not just you individually, but you as trustee of the trust, well, if God forbid something happens to you, now the successor trustee steps into your shoes, and now they can act as shareholder of that business. And that's what will allow them to appoint a new board of directors or new officers, and it'll enable them to continue the management of the business without having this potential interruption that might come with probate and figuring out who's going to be the next person to step in and manage those affairs. So I'd say you see it sometimes more often than you'd like to see it, where people won't factor in their business into their estate plan. And it's something that should definitely be considered when looking at someone who does own a small business.
Thank you so much, Patrick, for joining me on this episode. To learn more about Patrick or to inquire about his services as an attorney for your estate planning or small business needs, you can visit his website at elahmadielaw.com. That's ELAHMADIELAW.com. Or you can contact him directly via email at patrick@elahmadielaw.com, or call him at 925-401-5096. These links will be provided in the description of this episode's listing on YouTube and Spotify. And stay tuned for my next episode of Mika Minutes.